Hey guys, welcome to another video. This video is going to be about plaster dipping and the various things that you need to consider when you're plaster dipping an SLC. There's been a lot of talk lately on the GT40 site regarding plaster dipping, and frankly I think it's a smart move. The body's got to age. You're going to find more cracks over time, more pinholes are going to go open up, and if you spend a whole lot of cash doing a really nice paint job to begin with, you're probably going to find within a year that certain areas have opened up, and that really beautiful paint job that you spent a ton of money for has kind of gone to pot, and you're going to have to find some way to repair, which depending on how fancy a paint job you've gone, may be very difficult or impossible to do. So plaster dipping allows you to have some decent color to your car while you're waiting for the body to age, and while you're waiting for cracks and things to kind of rear their ugly heads. It's gonna happen. Alright, so this is the calm before the storm. I've got the car masked up and I'm getting ready to dip it once again. I'll walk around the car so you can take a look at how I've masked it, and I'll talk about some of the peculiarities about this car and why I've masked it the way I have. So let's see, starting with the wheel wells here. This area over here, you have to really get in deep in order to be able to hit this portion of the spider. And you actually have to get in around over here, hit this part, and wrap around, and then get back in here. So this is a really complex part to try to dip or paint. And of course I've bagged this area here so the suspension doesn't get any paint or dip on it. And then up over here, I've just kind of taped this up to keep some of the dip off of the wheel wells, but not a real big deal here. The fender lip is really thin here, and in order to get good adhesion here, you're going to have to shoot pretty much head on this little lip over here. And because it's so thin, you need as much help as you can get to get that dip to really wrap around. And generally what I'll do once I've finished and the dip has dried, I'll take my finger and dip it in naphtha and then just kind of roll the edge a little bit here, and that helps to get you some really good adhesion right on the edge so that it doesn't pull up over time. I've had pretty good luck doing that technique. Headlight cover is off, so I've got this masked here, and you can kind of see I've painted the bucket area black, and what I do is I have a little bit of overlap between the dip and where I've got the black, and that's just to ensure that when the lens cover comes back on here that the dip goes all the way behind the cover, or has pretty good coverage here so that there isn't any primer showing underneath. And that's what this kind of gray color is. This is actually primer. At some point in the future I may do a quote-unquote real paint job, and when I do that, I figured it would be good to have a primer already on the body. Helps with the dip actually as well. So I hand sanded all these body panels, or machine sanded, using up to about 400 grit or so. When you're at about 400 or so, the dip grips really well. You're not going to have any adhesion problems with the dip grabbing onto the body panels at 400 grit. What that means, however, is when you go to remove the dip, that the 400 grabs really well, and you're really going to have to put your elbows into it to pull the dip off the car. If you're spraying enough dip and you got good enough coverage and thickness, not a big deal. If you don't spray thick enough, then you're going to hate life. So I'm always pretty careful to ensure that I spray more than enough layers to ensure I've got nice strong coverage with the dip. Of course, if you do a real paint job, you're going to want to go much finer. In that case, if you go much finer, again, when you dip, if your preparation is much better and you've used a much finer grit, then the dip will come off easier. So one thing you'll notice is that all the body panels are on the car now, and if you've watched my other videos, what you'll find is that I had the front clam, the rear clam, and the doors off of the spider, and I'd painted everything separately. Nice, easy to do. You get great access to all these little nooks and crannies. The issue, however, is that, and this is the thing that DipYourCar.com Fonzie says never do, don't ever paint or dip your car in panels at a time. So don't spray this panel and then this panel and then this panel. in this panel, because what's going to happen is you're going to get poor blending between the relative panels. And you can spray the same number of coats of color for each of these panels, but there's going to be some variation. You know, you're going to move the gun faster for one panel, you're going to move it slower for the other one, you're going to have a little bit more product come out in one versus the other. And this is especially apparent if the color that you're using doesn't have great coverage. So the last time that I dipped this car, I used sulfur yellow, and the coverage wasn't great, even after I think 6 color coats. So what ended up happening is that out in the sun, you could see a very subtle difference between the yellow here, the yellow here, and the yellow here. And with all these 3 panels coming together right here, it was a bit of an eyesore. So listen to Fonzie, don't spray your car in panels. I didn't really have that issue the first time I dipped a car when I dipped it in Nile green, and I think the reason why that is because the green was dark enough that I got really good coverage from panel to panel to panel. And so having some slight difference in coverage didn't really result in an obvious difference in shading between the relative panels. But with the sulfur yellow, it was much more obvious. This next color that I'm going to do may or may not be as obvious, but I really didn't want to take a chance, so that's why I have the body panel set up the way I do. What this will allow me to do is it'll allow me to spray from one panel to the next, and get pretty good blending between the relative panels. Now you may be asking yourself, well, if I'm going to do that, why did I separate all these panels out, and why are these gaps all here? And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to get dip down into these areas here, which if the door is on and the clams are on, you're not going to be able to access these portions of the bodywork. And when the door is open, this interior portion is going to be fully visible. So I wanted to get this dipped, and I wanted the color to extend over here. And then you may notice I've got black paint along here and along the interior here, and then I've just kind of blended it out over here, knowing that I was going to dip this portion of the panel here. I didn't really care what happened here. The reason why I did this is that I had originally thought, back when I had sprayed the interior of the Spider with the black base coat, clear coat, I knew that when I dipped the car, that with the panels all in place, that the dip would not be able to penetrate into this crack very far. So I figured, well, if I've got it black, then I'll be able to clean the dip right at this line here, and then I'll be able to have a nice black line here between the various areas of the car. What I didn't do was I didn't spray this portion black, and I didn't spray this portion black. And if I had done that, maybe it would have looked all right with the clam shut and the door shut. It looked kind of like a normal car. You'd have color, and then at the gap you'd see black, and then you'd see color again, and then similarly with the door. With the door open, however, this being black, it'd be a little bit more obvious. Okay, not a deal breaker. However, because I haven't really done much of a body fit to this car, and I'm sure if you've watched my videos, or if you've really dissected some of the videos or some of the photos of my car, you'll see that doors in particular are not super well fit, and that's because I haven't prepped the doors at all. I've done just a very rough fit to kind of get it close, but that's really the extent of all that I've done. I haven't really done any real blending between the various panels. And the reason why that is because I figured, well, I'm going to dip the car. I wanted to drive the car. I didn't want to spend tens of hours blending and bondoing and getting everything right just for dip. I figured if I do a real paint job someday, then that's when I'm going to do a proper fitting and really get things dialed in. Haven't done that yet, and so yeah, it's just a rough body fit at this point. Anyway, so that's why the body panels are kind of gapped the way they are. It's so that I can get access or line of sight to these areas of the bodywork while I dip. This one might be a little bit difficult because I'll have to shoot straight down to hit this portion, and hopefully I can do so. The interior here, not as big a deal because that portion is going to be covered once this clam comes down. So I'm not too worried about getting really great penetration into there, but this portion of the black here, I'm going to try to do this one. If you noticed in my car in the past, this is an area that I have not painted or dipped in the past for actually this reason, just because the blending here, I didn't want to have to fight trying to get into these very deep portions of the bodywork. And there's some rubbing that's happening down here as well. So let's see, that's why the body panels are set up the way they are. That's why you see black along here and in the various areas of the car. Over here with the rear wheel well, again, the fender lip here is relatively small. So again, you'll have to really get in here and shoot pretty tightly into this to get good coverage, and then run your finger with naphtha to kind of roll the edge over. Paper here just so I don't spray the engine bay. You can see the engine bay is bagged pretty well here, but it's just one more line of defense to make sure I don't get dipped down into areas where I don't really want to get it. Rear tail lights removed. The way that I've shaped this opening for the tail lights, I have to be able to shoot in on the underside over here, because this is going to be visible if you're laying on the ground looking up at this portion of the car. Nobody's really going to do that. But in the rear over here, you'll notice that I've got the rear disconnected from the rear diffuser, and it's sitting on this support here. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I wanted to elevate this portion of the rear clam up high enough so that the rear diffuser is not interfering with this portion over here. Normally this would sit a few inches lower, and when it does, if you're trying to shoot and get coverage down here, you're not going to be able to do so. So that's why I've lifted it up here. I get access over here, and then also gives me access to shoot underneath over here as well to get this bottom lip over here. Not super critical. Nobody's going to see this portion of the car, so that's why I've got this elevated, so I can get access to here and to be able to shoot the underside over here. I've already gone through the car and cleaned it with the pre-dip spray, and I got dust in my garage here, so just before I paint tomorrow morning, I will come back and hit it again with some cleaner before I jump into the dip. You can see I've got the rear louvers pulled out over here, rear glass is pulled out again over here. I've got I'm going to be blending and trying to connect the door to the rear hatch over here, the rear clam, and so this line and this line should hopefully match up once the door panel is in place and the rear clam is in place. Door hardware. You'll notice the door hardware, the door handle is gone, and also you'll notice the arrow catch latch is gone as well. The reason why I have these pulled from the bodywork now is when you shoot the Plastidip, as it's drying, what's going to happen is it's going to start contracting and pulling in and basically shrinking down. And if you've got a gap between panels, it's not a big deal. What's going to happen is that the Plastidip is going to catch the edge, and it's going to hold at the edge, and then the rest of the Plastidip along the body panel is going to basically shrink down and really suck down on the panel. And that's one of the reasons why it hangs on as well as it does. Well, if I had the arrow catch latch installed here, and if I scored and pulled the Plastidip off the arrow catch, what could potentially happen is this area could start shrinking down in such a way that it pulls away from the arrow catch latch, and then it would reveal this gray primer underneath. And so I really wanted to avoid doing that, and by removing the arrow catch now, I can shoot this whole area here. This will shrink down and it'll get really nice, good adhesion at the opening, and then I'll be able to install the arrow catch right on top of it, and then I won't have to worry about the Plastidip pulling away. I've got these holes covered here so I don't shoot into the holes and block the holes. And similarly, same thing with the door handle. I've got it taped down here so I don't shoot Plastidip down into the interior of the door, And what I want to do is I want to be able to get the plaster dip down far enough so that as it starts to shrink, if it does pull away, that it's not going to pull away so far that it reveals the primer around the perimeter of the door. I have the windows removed, side mirrors removed as well. Pretty basic here. Again, air catch removed, and elevated over here so I can get access, line of sight down here to shoot the plaster dip over here so that I can get coverage and get into this area here. This is going to be pretty difficult. I suspect I'm going to have some problems trying to shoot this here, so we'll see what we can do tomorrow. I may have to change my plan, but this portion here, getting dip here, isn't quite as critical, I think, as getting dip along the front of the door here. With the body fit that I have right now, you can see little portions of this door kind of peeking out from this edge here, and so I'd rather get color here more so than maybe get color over here, but we'll see how much of an overspray I can get into that area there. Side vent covers removed, and this is just kind of taped off here so that I can spray into here. This is a really difficult portion to hit as well. This not so bad, this not so bad, but this part here, shooting from the underside of the car and up, that's going to be pretty difficult. I usually struggle getting really good coverage here. The good thing is that it's not really visible to anybody standing looking at the car from basically any angle unless you're laying on the ground. So as long as you get enough coverage in here that it looks like it's got color, then that's going to be good enough. The front over here, this is my little carbon overlay here, and so kind of what I've done in the past is just have a strip of carbon running down the middle. Plan to do that again. And then in the front over here, I've got my masking coming down here, and I add a bit of a curve here just to kind of make the front end look a little sleeker than it is. It's a pretty basic front. It's just got a very simple curve that goes around here, and it's if it's a single color here, it's very obvious what the shape looks like, and it's kind of blocky, kind of chunky. So I think by adding this little accent here, this little curve here, it makes the front end look just a little bit sleeker. This is the opening for the rear scoop for the air filter. Just tape this off so I don't get a whole bunch of dip going through to the other side over here, and just some tape covering the holes. Fuel door over here, I spent a fair amount of time trying to get this thing shaped just right so that it matches the profile of the fuel cap. And this is, you have to be kind of careful when you're shooting this here, because you do want to get on the underside over here and, kind of getting the gun down low enough to get access and shoot up into there can be a little difficult. And my experience has been that I get real nervous shooting this because I don't want to spray too much and have a run, and so I tend to shoot not enough, and then I get little balls of plaster dip forming basically, and so this gets a little bit rough. It's not the best part of the car typically when I'm dipping. Now you'll notice that I've got a ton of visqueen set up, wrapped all the panels fairly well. The engine bay, the spider, the portions where I've got the carbon fiber that I don't want to get dip onto, I'm being really, really careful here. And the reason why that is I suspect that if you use the dip pearl top coat, or you use dip armor, that when you go to shoot the clear, it moves a lot. It aerosolizes a lot like just standard regular clear coat paint, and so that stuff kind of it gets everywhere. And if you get a little bit back here, what can happen is if you have areas like this that have already been painted, so this has a black base coat and then a clear coat applied, if you spray or accidentally get dip pearl top coat on this with no base PDS or color, what can happen is I think that will cause the clear coat to fail. I have little areas on the car here and there where I suspect that may have happened.